The DogHouse, man. It's been a long time, bro. I want to hear everything. Tell me all about it. How's the parenting life? All that good stuff.
Well, so to keep it short and simple, most people don't realize how much goes into parenting. Oh, I see what you're talking about with the stretching thing. But anyways, my
It's too late now.
it's funny. It's too late. We'll roll with it. Fuck it though. So yeah, no. As far as parenting goes, man, it's been a hoot. It's been a blast. I always tell people, when it comes to parenting, that I think that like being a parent changes you.
Faux show.
A lot of people don't realize that when you have a kid, you no longer are 100% you. At that point, when that baby's born, it's no longer about you. It just isn't. Every little breathing moment of your life now is consumed by that baby, that child, that kid, and then later on that adult. I always tried telling people that I never thought I'd have that moment where I would sit there and say, wow, I know what people are talking about, but I have had it. And, I think that it's changed my mind on a lot of things. In terms of, and I don't like getting into this particular topic for many, many reasons, and I think it's a really silly topic, but it's only strengthened my position on abortion. Holding that little boy and seeing him growing up, even within the short 2 months that I've had him, it's been wonderful. And I don't think that a lot of people realize that. And I think that, when I always say, and I tell people that, you've got to have worked in a prison to understand how prison works. I say that with parenting. You have to have a kid to understand what a parent really is. You could sit there and guess. You could sit there and look at the kid in the aisle and say, man, I would do this differently. Man, I would do this differently. But you don't know what you would do until you have that little boy or little girl in your hands and you are dedicating everything to them.
Bro, it's like like God comes down and flips a little switch in your heart and your brain, man. I know, man. I got 4 kids. I know exactly what I know. Yeah. Like there's no way to. Words can't really explain it until you see your child born.
Well, and the thing is that my wife's computer's tied to her phone. So the thing is that with being a parent, there's a switch that flips to where you are no longer you. You're just not. You no longer care about your stuff. You no longer care about, for my case, streaming. I still wish I could. I do love to stream, and I absolutely wish I could. But unfortunately, sometimes, if I were to dedicate the time between work, school, and streaming, I'd have no time to spend with my little one. And that's something that, I'm adamant about, is that I want to spend time with my child. I want to be there for him. I want to see those moments. And sometimes streaming doesn't allow for that.
That's for damn sure. That's why I took such a long break, man. I was gone for like 8 months. I spent all that time with my kids. But hey, bro, you'll find time to do you. You're gonna have to find time to do you. You're for sure. Crazy. But yeah, right now, newborn infant, you're tied up. It's all diapers, bibs, and Gerber, bro.
I feel 10 years older than I really am, to put it lightly. I feel so much more exhausted.
How's the sleep situation?
So what had happened is when my baby was first born, I got 0 sleep at the hospital, because the nurses were coming in every 2 hours. I was exhausted. When we got home, we tried to do what typical parents, you think. Again, this is why I tell people, you can put this in your head all day long about what you're going to do, but until that baby's here, you don't know what you're going to do. So when we got home, I thought, oh, okay, me and my wife will take turns. She wakes up, spends 2 hours with the baby to go to feed him and everything, and then I'll wake up. We found out very quickly I don't wake up. It doesn't matter if that baby's screaming. I do not wake up for anything unless you end up pouring a bucket of water on my head. So because I was unemployed at that time, my wife would stay up during the evenings. This was at first. She would stay up almost all night with the baby and feed him, and then I would wake up in the morning, and then I would take him for 4 or 5 hours. Now that I'm working, and now that she's put a little bit more trust with him and everything, we got a little outlet monitor. It's a little sock thing you put on the baby's feet to make sure that they're still breathing and all that other good stuff. She now ends up going to sleep, but she'll wake up every 2 hours.
Man, I'm not advising any of the viewers to do this, okay? This is what my wife did and why it was easy for us. My wife will talk in her sleep almost.
Wow.
She sleeps good, but she sleeps lightly. Like all I got to do is say, "Hey, babe," and she's like, "Yeah." Right in the middle of REM sleep, she'll wake up and respond to me. With all three of our kids, dude, she kept the baby right next to her in the bed. Which is dangerous, guys, which is really dangerous. It just so happens that my wife was able to do it safely, and basically she breastfed. So anytime the baby got hungry, she just ate right there in the bed. I got to sleep all night. She got to sleep all night. But it's not well advised to do that. It's extremely dangerous. You can roll over and smother your kid instantly, and I've actually heard stories where that happened. But my wife was adamant on that's how things were going to go, and it worked out for us.
Yeah.
We lucked out. I wouldn't say we lucked out. My wife is just, she had she was just turned on. How do I say it? Like you would say a wolf. Like you would say a wolf is turned on all the time, right?
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's just aware.
Her parenting is turned on 24/7.
Yeah, and this is what gets
in. For you, bro. I can't wait to come by and come see the kid and shake the baby.
Yeah, no, right? Yeah, the baby, man. I'm telling you, it's amazing. I'm happy to have a son, and I was expecting a girl, honestly.
Who called it though? Who called it? Who called it?
Honestly, no one did. Everyone.
Go back in the Discord chat. Right when you told me your wife is pregnant, I said you're having a boy.
Well, you did. Yeah, no, you did. You're the only one that I could think of that actually said it was going to be a boy. Everybody in my family and everything thought it was going to be a girl.
To be fair, I had a 50-50 chance of getting that right.
Hey, you did have a chance. There was nothing really.
The reason why I assumed you were going to have a boy. Now, this may be. I'm not a doctor, but I know that smoking pot lowers your sperm count. A lot of pot smokers that I know had girls, but you're not a pot smoker, and you've been on a health kick for about 2 years, so you're super healthy. You don't
there.
You don't drink. Your testosterone's through the fucking roof, and so that's why I was thinking you would have a boy. But hell,
probably.
How old is he old right now?
He's 2 months old. So he'll be technically. My wife is one. I'm one of those people that goes by the weeks. She's the one that goes by the days, and so every 30 days. So she's like, he's not really 2 months until this week. He hit 8 weeks last week, so I'm like, he's 2 months in my opinion. But I get it, and whatever you want to do by days, whatever. To me, he's 2 months regardless. But
she's super hormonal right now. She's always right, bro.
Yeah, well, and she's not as bad. I mean, there was a lot of issues with her afterwards, but she's calmed down a lot. But yeah, being a parent is amazing. It's still something I'm having to get accustomed to because, to be quite honest with you, I still kind of look at him and go, is this something that it's hard for me to make the connection with my child, and some people who are parents understand this. To me, because he's a baby and he's not talking back to me, not back in a bad way, but just actually talking back to me, responding to me. I tell you, it's hard to make that connection.
Again, I'm no expert, but I tell you a good way to bond with your son right now is skin to skin contact. So when you're sitting on the couch watching TV, take your shirt off, put his chest against your chest, and hold him. Yeah. They need that. That's scientific medical proof that they need that. They say that if a baby by itself without contact with the mother or father, no matter how well fed and how nutritious they are, they'll die without contact with the mother or father, without contact with somebody. They need that. So skin to skin contact's a good way to bond, man. Hey, enjoy these days. These days are up and down. They suck, but you'll miss them when they're gone.
Oh, absolutely. That's something that I'm sitting here. I'm like, man, he's growing up really quickly. I mean, 2 months is already here. It feels like yesterday was born, and you know what they say about a blink of an eye and things change. I mean, I'm only in 2 months here, and I'm already feeling like that. You know, where it's like, holy crap. Yesterday, I swear we were just leaving the hospital with him, and he was a little tiny kid because they induced my wife. So when he was born, he was tiny. He was 6 pounds 1 ounces.
Did she have a C-section or natural?
Natural. And I tell you what, my wife. Let me tell you something. My wife was a champ.
11. My wife's 4'11".
Oh,
and they were like, you are not having any of our kids. They're like, you're not having this kid naturally.
Yeah.
So
no, my wife was a champ. I'm not gonna go into obviously all the details here and stuff, but my wife was a freaking champ.
Hey, snip? Did they have to do the snip?
No, they didn't. He was so small that I think that's also what helped.
How much did he weigh?
6 pounds 1 ounces.
That's small, but that's not like scary small. How tall are you?
No. I'm 5'11". He's got what we've been finding out is based on his like weight throughout the pregnancy. He's gonna be one of those kids that's probably tall like me, but skinny. So like that's what's going on. Is he's growing like lengthwise normal, but his weight is just on the low side. So that's probably what it is. Is just that he's gonna be a taller, skinnier kid. Now unless he bulks up and stuff, you know. But for the most part, he's just gonna be a tall kid. Tall genes run in our family too. My grandfather was like freaking 5'11" or whatever. My brother towers over me. This kid's like 6'2", 6'3" or whatever. Dude's tall. And he's my little brother, which is embarrassing. I mean, your little brother's taller than you, but you know, whatever.
Hey, is my mic muted?
But yeah.
All right, cool. You didn't hear me just then. I wanted to make sure that my mic was muted. Sometimes my mute button doesn't work. I'm trying to mute it when I hit the vape.
Oh, you're good. But yeah, so kiddo's great. Kind of I find time now to still kind of talk about politics. You know, I mean, I still do go on panels and roundtables and things like that to talk to people about politics, but you know, it's really interesting to me because it seems like there's a new I guess you could say a new class of people that are coming into politics on Twitch in particular that weren't there when me and you were streaming necessarily with politics when at least I first came into the scene. When I first came, I mean, hell, you came in before I did. And where it's gone is just mind-blowing to me. Absolutely mind-blowing.
It trips me up, man. I seen Electrofan's channel. He's got over 5,000 followers, and I was like, damn, if I'd have just stuck around and kept grinding. It wasn't going to be good for me. This right here became a prison to me. Going live every day.
Oh yeah.
It became a prison.
It does.
And the community here, there's a lot of great people on Twitch, a lot of wonderful people, but there's way more toxic people than there are good people on Twitch. And see, what I'm trying to do now is, I don't know if I'm back officially. I know that I'm, you know, doing podcasts, uploading stuff to YouTube and shit like that. But really, I think I'm probably maybe once a week when I officially say I'm back, maybe once or twice a week I'll pop on and talk to chatters and stuff like that. But really, I'm just going to be scheduling podcasts. And when I do these podcasts, I'm not going to really be paying attention to the chat much.
Yeah, well, and here's the funny thing too is when the new guys come in with old school tricks that I've already seen. So I'm not going to name names, but I've had these engagements now with a couple of people where they come in and they try to pull the old school style tricks at the debate bro or gotcha questions. And you know, I go, I already know these things. I said, I'm not going to engage with it. And 9 times out of 10, I don't engage with it. You know, and that's something that really gets me is when this is what bothers me. When it comes to politics, I want to have a genuine, honest to God discussion. I always try, I know this is a little bit biased, but when I was doing streaming and I had interviews with people, I'd have multiple people come up to me and say, "Doghouse, I think you're really a lefty." That tells me, when I was interviewing a lefty guest, I said, so to me, that tells me that I'm doing something right, because that means that the questions I'm asking are more along the lines of my guest. And that means that I'm extracting that information from my guest. And I don't think that somebody that's in Twitch, there's a lot of people on Twitch politics that are there for pure entertainment purposes. But then there are people there that want genuine, honest discussions, and it can be had in a one-on-one debate, like discussion, not a debate. And I always tell people this because a lot of the times there's easy ones to spot. For example, people will ask leading questions and you can kind of see them coming from a mile away. For example, if you say, "Oh, I believe in guns," they go, "Oh, so do you believe like in, all guns?" And you're like, "What kind of question is that? What, like, why are you asking that?" Like, what? And then when they say that, then they usually blame it on what is funny to me. And I've heard this not just from one person, so I'm not pointing at anybody in particular here. But if it fits, the shoe fits, where they blame it on the Socratic method. Because I want to dive in. I want to understand your ideology. No, you're not. That's a flat out, that's not what's happening there.
Man, I'm really important accused me of being a lefty the other day.
No shit.
The reason why, what makes me and you stand out, I think, on this platform is we consider ourselves conservatives. We really don't claim a party. And when people were saying, "Hey, that's issues on the right," or "Those are talking points on the right," or "Those are talking points on the left," my response to "I'm really important," it just so everybody knows, I'm really important is a Twitch streamer. He's amongst the political community here on Twitch. Anyways, we were talking about prison for profit, prison reform. We were talking about the police in this country and stuff like that. And my viewpoints, he said, were leftist, and I was like, man, you shouldn't really put a political spin on it because these are American problems. They're not leftist issues. They're not right issues. And to me, that's one of the biggest issues in politics in our society, is to where if you have a view on something, people immediately want to say, "Oh, that's a leftist view," or that's a conservative view. No, I mean, it's one thing I see that people on the left and the right, not all, but most, can agree that the prison for profit system is trash, the war on drugs is trash, and I don't like the fact that in this political climate they want to say, "Hey, well, that's a leftist ideology." No, it's not. Oh, it's not.
Yeah.
Those are Americans' issues. That's American problems. That's not a left or right thing.
Yeah, and the thing about with me is I always tell people I've only recently come out and said what I really am, which is conservative. But I say that because I'm forced to in a lot of ways to say where I line. I don't think that should matter. I do lend a lot of support towards Trump and a bunch of different things like that, but it's for different reasons. So if people who actually know me and understand how I think and how I operate understand that I really do dive into facts, I dive into laws, I dive into memorandums, I dive into executive orders, and so for me, yeah, I do lend a lot of stuff to Trump. But it's not because I think Trump's a god. It's not because I'm a conservative, so I support Trump. It's that I see that a lot of the things that the media does with Trump gets taken out of context. And in some cases, there are things that are wrong with Trump. And now in terms of policing and prisons and stuff, I think a lot of people don't understand how certain things operate. So they tend to think this is how it operates and make these assumptions based on what they've either seen in movies or what they think sounds like it's not far out of the impossibility. But then when you come in and you explain to them, for example, policing and all the different trainings that go into it, when you describe the on-the-job training, when you describe how some departments require a degree, and you try to break all this down and bring it to a nuanced perspective, then they're like, because you're revealing it. It's like, and I know I'm like throwing 20 different examples out here, but another great one is the border. I've heard this conversation. We need more technology. To make that claim, then you've got to have some kind of evidence that the technology that is in place currently is not effective enough, right? And some people wouldn't be able to tell you what's actually on the border, right? They won't. If you ask the average person that says, "Yeah, we need more technology." Okay, what technology do we have at the border? A wall, and they get baffled. So what I do on this platform is if I see an article that mentions Trump said blank, 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 I go and look at what Trump said. I look at it in the full context of things. Because if me and you are having a conversation and we're talking about guns, and then I go off on a random tangent and I say, or let's say I make a hyperbolic statement, for example, and I say, "Oh, you know what? Fuck guns. I don't want to keep guns." And then they take that out of context, right? It looks bad. So I look at the full statement. Then if there's a law that gets into place about a gun law or something, I can go into that law, look at the law and say, that is what it is. I think a lot of people make this mistake. I've mentioned this before on a couple of streams. A lot of people will sit there and go from article to article to article to article to article, but they never go to the source. What they're doing when they go to article to article to article to article, they're only going really from opinion to opinion to opinion to opinion and never getting to the facts of, because those people are looking at facts somewhere. So go to what they're looking at and form your own opinion. This is why I come up with some crazy shit that people have never heard of. Because they're like, "Oh, what? I'm used to the media narrative. I'm used to reading these articles." Because they never heard of the facts.
Man, I think when it comes to the mainstream left, like mainstream media, leftist mainstream media, this is my theory, and I'm almost 100% on this. I think they want Trump to win. No, I think the mainstream left. I think it's all a big fucking scam, and they want Trump to win. Either that or they're just extremely stupid.
Yeah, to me,
which Democrat do you think would have been the absolute best to nominate?
You want me to be real honest with you? It would have been one or two people. It would have been either Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. Personally, I personally believe that Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, because here's the thing, I talked about this during during last year when this whole thing was going on with like 17 candidates. My greatest fear was Bernie Sanders being the nominee. For one, he would draw out the younger vote. For two, I know that the crazy old nutbag would actually sit there and actually do these policies when he gets into position. I always said that Elizabeth Warren was a career politician. Kamala Harris was a career politician. Klobuchar was a career politician. Most of these people I didn't feel were actually going to pass really anything because of how bold these things were. Joe Biden now looks lost and then I'll get out. Dude, you put him in front of the camera and it's bad. I really was worried about Bernie, and I mentioned that very openly. I said, when someone asked me, who do you want to win? At that time, I believe I said Biden or Kamala Harris, because I felt that those two wouldn't get anything done. They wouldn't.
I think, now I don't agree with this lady's foreign policies. I don't agree with. I disagree with her on almost everything. I think Tulsi Gabbard was their best chance. She served 6 tours. She's currently serving, and she's honest. She got a good track record. That to me, she was their best chance, and they completely hexed her out. Wouldn't even let her speak at the DNC. I like Tulsi Gabbard. I like her. Now I don't agree with her views or nothing like that, but imagine this one day. Imagine a Dan Crenshaw presidency with Tulsi Gabbard as his VP. They're both veterans. They're both soldiers.
Yeah,
that'd be legit. You got a conservative president with a Democrat VP. America needs.
That'd be a powerhouse.
Like America needs something
I agree.
like that. That would keep people.
Oh, I agree.
That would keep people on the left. And besides that, Dan Crenshaw has a lot of leftist views. Dan Crenshaw is I think he's like the future politician, somebody that kind of he believes in policies on the left and the right. Now, I don't agree with everything Dan Crenshaw is into, but He is a stand-up fucking dude. I can give him that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, to me, it doesn't make much sense why Biden's the nominee. But hey, I said, I know that your theory is maybe that they're wanting to elect him. I really do think that some of these lefties are absolutely blind. And from everything I've been able to gather, it seems like they want to vote for him because he's not Trump. And again, I can't blame them because that is something that they ended up doing. A lot of Republicans say that they did for Trump versus Hillary, right? They're like, there was no other good candidate, and so I voted for Trump. And so, again, if that's how you want to vote, hey, vote that way. I think there's a whole lot more other issues in the 2020 elections than besides the candidates themselves. I think we have a lot to look at in terms of the infamous mail-in voting. Bro, things like that.
I was just about to ask you what your thoughts on that were, and I'm surprised that hasn't gone to the Supreme Court. They can't do that. There's a reason why we've never used mail-in voting. You can't do it.
So I want to explain this too, because I think a lot of people. I've looked into mail-in voting. I've looked into absentee voting,
they've already caught the post office throwing away ballots at the local level. They've already found. Yes. There's already been a bunch of fraud going on with this shit.
Well, so my issue isn't necessarily with the fraud thing alone. I mean, that's a factor, sure. But the thing that gets me is there's bigger issues at play. So, for example, with mail-in voting, what they're essentially doing is and I love how they conflate these two. They love to do this. They usually say Trump does not like mail-in voting. Trump attacks mail-in voting. Trump supports absentee ballots, okay? Trump does support voting by mail. He does not support vote by mail. There's a big difference. And this is where I think that there could be compromise. I have no problem with absentee voting. I do have a problem with vote by mail. Vote by mail does open up the gates to a possibility of voter fraud. I tell people this with the possibility because when they mention that their voter fraud is so low, they're really talking about absentee ballots. They're not talking about actual mail-in voting because and there's two reasons why I can debunk this. So only like 5 states actually do what the system is being put in place right now for vote by mail. I think it's like Oregon, Colorado, like a bunch of like small states. And it was only implemented in like 2010 or 2014 that, and in some cases, they haven't really been fully implemented. There's only been one state to my knowledge that they've actually fully implemented a vote by mail system. And in some of these cases, they're only at the county or city level, not at the national election level. So it's already on a very, very microscopic scale for the system by which a lot of these states are trying to push. So there really hasn't been an opportunity for a good sample size, I guess you could say, to see whether or not there's been voter fraud. Absentee ballots, you have to request them. So there's a little bit more of a barrier to get them. With vote by mail, it just mails it out to anybody who's a registered voter. So if you haven't updated your address, they're going to send it to your former address. This is why I say this could be a problem. It doesn't mean it will be, but it could be. It's because we haven't seen this be tested on a very large scale like the national election, and we haven't seen. We're going to see turnout for vote by mail voting, period, whether it be vote by mail or absentee ballots. I guarantee you we're going to see a turnout like we have never seen in history before. Okay. Already
in California, there's like 1,000 times more ballots than there are registered voters.
Say it again. I'm sorry. I didn't catch that. What was you said?
In California, they're already catching fraud. Like it's already happening. There's 1,000 times more ballots than there are registered voters.
Well, so there's some other issues with this as well. Again, outside of the fraud thing, there is also the rejection of ballots that we've been seeing. I think now we're up to like 500,000 ballots that have been rejected due to signature issues. And so what my concern, these are concerns. It doesn't mean that this is going to be necessarily an issue. Okay, so I want to make sure this is abundantly clear. The concern here is that if 500,000 ballots have been rejected, okay, if we have a nationwide election for the president of the United States, how do I know I'm not going to get a ballot in the mail returned to me after the election? How can I trust the government of my state to get that ballot back to me before the election? That's a big concern. I have a lot of questions on how they're going to do that.
No, I 100% agree, man. I think that the biggest problem with the whole mail-in voting thing is under the Obama administration, the post office, they lost a lot of their funding, and dude, could you let's say 50 million people vote.
Yeah.
Dude, that will shut down the fucking post office. There's no way. We'd be waiting for a month. We'd be waiting a month or two just to find out who won. There's no way.
Well, and so get this, the USPS, since you brought that up. I did a little bit of research when this first broke. I had no idea this was going to become a national issue, but now it has. So I looked at the USPS. The USPS is not able to change their revenue streams without congressional approval. Their expenses are mile high thanks to the 2006 Republican, and I'll get to that in a minute, bill. So that has to do with, so there's a couple of things about this Republican bill. Let's dive into this real quick, because this is one thing a lot of people try to bring up. One of the things about the 2006 Republican bill is they did have pros and cons. One of the cons is that they ended up doing the pensions and retirements for like 70 years or whatever it was. It was a very long time, okay? But it enabled the post office to deliver mail on Saturdays. I think there were some other things along with that it lowered the rates and stuff like that. But what people also don't see is that the politicians that are against the USPS Republican bill were the same ones who signed off on that bill. Let's name a few. Nancy Pelosi, Sheila Jackson Lee. Now, let's talk about a candidate who's running for president, Joe Biden. At that time, he was a U.S. senator who this bill ended up passing the Senate by unanimous consent. What that kind of means is that no one objected to it. Now, people could say that Joe Biden's vote wouldn't have had much to say, but it does matter to me, because if he's going to come out against the Republican bill in 2006, he can't necessarily do that with the footing of how he voted at that time. If he didn't support at the time, show a support of no, my opinion. So I think this is the biggest thing too, is that when people point back to the 2006 Republican bill, I'm like, that's only half of the equation. Sure, that's causing issues because of the expenses, but the problem is that mail packages are extremely low, volume is extremely low, and the USPS is not able to really change their revenue stream without congressional approval because of how the USPS is structured. So if you are looking at it in a way, a USPS, to me, is an example of why we should not have government-run companies or government involved in these companies in the way that they are with USPS.
Another issue is they fucking endorsed Biden. So the very people that are going to be in charge of our ballots are endorsing. I mean, there's too many issues with mail-in voting. Like, sure. I think that there's zero chance now, and I'm not being a Trump fanboy here by saying this.
No, it's okay.
I think there's zero chance that Trump will lose unless it's to fraud. With this it's stacked up so badly against the Democrats right now. Their nominee can't complete sentences, all right? And the shit that they have done over the past 4 years has got Democrats walking away from the party. Like, we'll have more Democrats vote Trump this year than last year for sure. Our cities are on fire. People have lost their businesses. People have this whole COVID-19 thing. I mean, in California, they're still fucking shut the fuck down. People are leaving California. Hey, here's one. Joe Rogan left California. A rich guy, a guy with plenty of fucking money, was fed up. So imagine all these people that don't have that kind of money.
Yeah, so my prediction with how November is going to go is we're not going to know who won on election night. I'm 98% sure of that, okay? Is it a possibility? Maybe. But it's a very unlikely. And so it's really interesting to me, too, because a lot of people were rumoring that Trump would not concede on election night. The ironic thing is, because of their push for vote by mail, it's very possible that Trump won't concede, and neither will Joe Biden on election night. Neither should, in my opinion, concede on election night. I think there will be votes that are probably still going to trickle in. I'm sure CNN will try to announce the winner. I think that'd be silly. I'm sure Fox News may even try to do it. But we won't know on election night. And, you know, in my opinion, if you want something, if you don't want Trump, if you want to prove that Trump won't concede, then I would encourage you to vote in person. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that. I think that when it comes to COVID, you know, that's a whole nother topic in of itself, but we can get into that. COVID's another.
The scam.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing: is a lot of people with COVID, with how they're judging COVID, is they're doing two things. One, they're either forgetting about the past, okay, which is happening very quickly, and understandably so. When we have a lot of information in a super fast changing thing, they're going to forget what happened yesterday because they're absorbed with so much information. Or two, they are going to possibly, I drew a blank. So one of these two things are going to happen. So what I tell people is to, they don't know exactly what's going on. They just don't know. And so this is what I try to tell people is, for example, I went onto the WhiteHouse.gov website and I found out that Mike Pence has been holding meetings with governors ever since the very beginning of this whole thing broke out. This has been a weekly ongoing thing that he's made calls to governors, and you don't hear a peep about this in the news. There are extensions that have been made in terms of National Guard, in terms of funding. There's been multiple vaccines that have been fast-tracked, and so they're kind of uninformed in some of these things. But yeah, the COVID thing to me is just that I don't think people have they're not understanding the situation and how it's changing. For example, the whole Trump tapes came out earlier, right? About the, downplaying. And I've seen now tapes come out where apparently Trump was asked this very question about downplaying the virus back in like April. This is not a breaking news story. And apparently, even with the downplaying thing, let's keep in mind what happened in February. This is an ever-changing situation that people keep forgetting about, was that Fauci downplayed it. Nancy Pelosi downplayed it. There were some people who didn't really downplay it, but they weren't trying to sound the alarms. In a lot of cases, we would say that maybe they didn't necessarily downplay it because of how they responded. For example, somebody actually sent me a link to a CDC article that showed back in January 29th that COVID could be transported or transmitted through the air. But the CDC is headed by the White House, and that was made publicly available. So it's publicly accessible. So this is nothing new then, and so for me, it's like, I think that it's not a very hot take for me to sit here and say that I think that we took the appropriate actions that were available at that time. And it wasn't like Trump was doing anything out of the ordinary that other people weren't doing, right? The CDC was saying, the coronavirus task force that was in place very early on was saying that it's a low risk to the U.S. at the time of February 2nd. We also had Trump come out saying he was going to downplay it a little bit. But again, Fauci came out and said the same thing in February, where he's like, hey, hold off on buying masks. Hold off on buying masks. It's not important. People forget that.
I think that Fauci did that because of I guess he didn't want a mask shortage in this country. And he didn't want a mask shortage because he wanted our first responders and doctors and nurses and stuff to have masks, had this thing blown off his hot. But throughout this whole thing, man, you could tell that the whole thing has fucking been blown completely out of proportion in a scam. All these politicians, when they think they're off cameras, they're not wearing their fucking mics. Nancy Pelosi fucking had a fucking a hair salon fucking open up where she walked into the motherfucker without a mask. Then she went on national TV and said that they was accusing that hair salon of setting her up. And this is my opinion on that. If you can be set up by a hair salon, maybe you shouldn't have access to classified information.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, Nancy Pelosi was the one that was in Chinatown in January when Trump was supposedly telling this reporter that he was downplaying it. Nancy Pelosi was in Chinatown in January or early February saying, hey, come to Chinatown. Mind you, all not while wearing a mask. So this is something else I keep telling people. They hound Trump's ass for not wearing a mask or not putting in a mask mandate. But not one single peep was anybody in January or February wearing a mask. No one in the government was wearing a mask. The same people that were judging Trump. So it's very, very funny to me how we forget the past.
Well,
so
when people bring that shit up, man, this is one thing I always say. It's not up to a president to tell every state and every governor and every mayor what to do and how to do it. It's up to the state. Yeah. It's up to the local level. It's up to the governors. Sure. So all these issues that are happening across the United States, and they're trying to blame Trump for everything, bruh, it's your governor's fault. It's your mayor's fault. Yeah. Where we live, they haven't mandated anything.
Well, so here's the thing. So Governor Gretchen Whitmer came out and said that, Trump's not funding me. He's not giving us our National Guard troops, which is really funny for military state. But anyways, it's another topic. Apparently, the White House responded, well, hey, if you're doing that, you're misappropriating your funds, because apparently, yes, they reduced how much they're giving her in terms of money for the National Guard troops, but that's because the CARES Act had funding for it. So that remainder amount. So in other words, they reduced funding down to, say 90% or whatever it was, okay? They basically put in 10% from the CARES Act. So this is the whole thing, is that states that are complaining, saying, well, we don't have funding. No, you do have funding, and if you don't, then you're misappropriating funds, or you're not allocating them the right things. And the other thing is, like Texas, a lot of people, man, this is what bothers me, is they're like, oh, Dan Patrick didn't follow the rules and the recommendations. People are not remembering things, because back in March, Governor Abbott came out, as soon as the White House Coronavirus Task Force came out with these guidelines about how to reopen. He said from the onset that you could not enter a salon without a mask. The recommendation was to wear a mask. And I went to a salon. Literally, I will not forget this. The day I went to get my haircut from after the lockdown, I was required to wear a mask inside the store. When I went to the gym, the day the gyms opened, I had to wear a mask. Actually, no. Actually, yes. I think I had to wear a mask at the gym. Maybe. I'd have to check that again. I forgot.
I went and got my haircut, and I walked into the... I'm not going to say which barber shop, because
no, yeah, don't talk. Yeah.
But when I walked in, I asked them if I needed a mask on. They're like, "Hell no, you don't have to wear a mask."
Yeah, and each place is different, right? And I'm not sitting here saying every place is perfect, but when people sit there and say, "Well, Texas didn't take it seriously; they were opened up too soon," they went by exactly how they were supposed to open. And I've been saying this from the very get-go, is that. I don't think that masks were the issue. I think there's a whole slew of issues here that are going on. A lot of people were pointing to protests. A lot of people were pointing to opening up too early. I say it's a mixture of everything, because here's the thing. What people tend to forget is that people were still going to the grocery store. They were still going to the beaches. They were still going to the parks. Yes, it was in an open setting, but you can still contract coronavirus from those settings if you're in a close enough proximity and you're not wearing a mask. And people keep forgetting this. A lot of stores, and matter of fact, in March, when the shutdown was happening, I don't believe required a mask at all. They were sanitizing baskets and doing all that, but they weren't requiring masks. Matter of fact, you could go into the store and you're walking right past somebody. Remember, I don't know if anyone's ever been to a U.S. Grocery store recently, but you can see how small these grocery aisles are. They're not 6 feet wide. So when you're passing by somebody and someone goes, guess what? You could have contracted it. And in some cases, they showed where it can go into the other aisle.
Man, I caught COVID, man. I caught COVID. And it wasn't shit. It was like a fucking cold. And Texas is actually doing really, really well, man.
Now they are, yeah.
They're treating in Texas. They're using hydroxychloroquine and Z-Packs and zinc. Yeah. And the doctor that I went to, and also a guy from my unit went to, she had over 1,000 patients and hasn't lost a single patient, man.
Well, there's some flaws here too, right? So, for example, what you were mentioning with your barber and how you weren't wearing a mask, that can contribute to it. We look at things like, for example, my wife went to go get tested because her manager tested positive, and so everyone in her store had to go get tested. And I went down to a testing facility. They told us to drive around the back. There was a line of people outside of their cars for a drive-through testing. I'm like, do not get the fuck out. I'm like, don't get the fuck out of this car and go in that line. They're supposed to come to you and get you to test. I'm like, why would you put a bunch of people that are potentially positive in a line with no mask?
I think it's all a big fucking scam. I think it's all blown completely out of proportion. And most of the deaths that have happened in this country weren't necessarily from COVID. It's how they were treating COVID in the beginning. They were putting everybody on vents right off the bat. People that fucking go on vents have about a 75% chance of fucking dying no matter what it is, because the machine is breathing for you. And when a machine breathes for you for too long, and you take them off, your brain doesn't know how to tell your lungs to breathe anymore. Like in New York, they were straight up murdering fucking people. I'm not going to say that it was intentional or anything, but multiple fucking nurses came out publicly and were like, we're killing these patients. We're killing these patients. When the whole fucking time, this is the thing that pisses me off the most about it. Trump came out from the very get-go and was talking about hydroxychloroquine. Am I saying that right? Is it hydroxychloroquine?
It's hydroxychloroquine. You're close enough.
All right, so he came out almost immediately talking about this, but because Trump said it, the fucking left was like, no. Well, guess what? That's how we're treating it right now. That's how that doctor in Houston has over 1,000 patients and hasn't lost a single one. Z-Paks, zinc, and hydroxychloroquine or whatever. And the biggest thing about it is you're not on the mainstream media. They're not talking about anything they should be talking about. If it was as huge of a concern as they're making it out to be, they'd be talking about vitamin D. They'd be talking about fucking zinc. They would be talking about vitamin C. They never talk about that. Yeah. They never talk about getting enough sleep. They never talk about getting enough exercise. They never talk about vitamin C, zinc, or vitamin D. And they completely fucking crucified anybody that brought up hydroxychloroquine. I feel like I'm not saying that right.
No, it's okay. I mean, you kind of are. So one of the things too that people tend to forget as well is that Trump wasn't just touting hydroxychloroquine. I tried finding the name of the other drug, but I forgot what it's called. But he was touting another drug as well. So this isn't all about just like that one. And if we want to go and be like even more like pessimistic.
Well, my point in it is like, how many people in this country actually for real died of COVID-19 because of the mainstream media because they crucified fucking hydroxychloroquine. Like they just completely nope. All this bullshit. We don't have enough testing. We haven't done any research on it. Blah blah blah. All this shit. But they're trying to fucking fast track a fucking vaccine. That's on, they'll fast track a vaccine, but hydroxychloroquine, something they've been using for malaria for fucking years. They just completely crucified that drug, and a lot of people died because of it.
They still do have a lot of ongoing tests right now being done by the CDC with hydroxychloroquine as a recipe in there, as well as with Z-Pak. They're each in different phases, but hydroxychloroquine is still being tested. Whether people want to say that it's good or bad, it's a whole nother topic. But there's many, many, many drugs right now that are being tested.
My doctor didn't prescribe me anything. My doctor checked my lungs, asked me how I was feeling, and I was feeling pretty good. I told him it was like a cold. He was like, man, just Theraflu. Go take you some Theraflu. And for me, it was, I don't know, 3 days. And I don't even know if I really fucking had COVID-19. That's just, they tested me and said, oh yeah, you got the COVID. So I went home for 14 days, did my thing. But after I started to feel sick. And because I've taken this COVID-19 thing seriously, but at the same time been extremely skeptical. So when I'm out in my community, I'm doing my best to protect others and to make sure I'm not getting anybody sick or nothing like that. But man, he didn't even prescribe me shit.
Well, so here's something else I tell people too is that this is what I was going to say. The second part was when I said my mind went blank. A lot of people are looking at the present and saying that we didn't have a good enough response, and saying that now looking back, they're not looking at the present time and what was going on at that time. You know, I don't think anybody really could have predicted. I think there was a lot of people that came out with like a 1 million number of deaths, 2 million numbers, 500,000 deaths. No one knew exactly how many deaths were going to be there. And in a lot of cases, there was different information going around at that time. So we have to take each, when we look at the response, we have to look at the information that was given up to that time, and then we have to assess, was that a good enough response or not based on that past information, because no one's a fortune teller, right? If the president doesn't have information that, because the president's not going to have a fortune teller, like a crystal ball that's going to say there will be 200,000 deaths, and you know that's not what he found out, right? Like, so we have to operate on that premise. And the thing is, what you were saying in terms of shit, what were you saying earlier? You said something about the overreaction. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah,
I think that's what you were talking about. But the thing about Trump's response is that I think that that's what I was gonna say. So what we also forget is that the testing. So a lot of people are sitting here saying that we had like a spike in cases and things like that. But what people again forget to mention and forget to realize is that testing that was done in March and February and April, I remember, I don't know about if anybody else remembers this, and you could probably pull up articles that show this, you could not get tested unless you had a fever. That was the only way you could get tested. As testing increased, then we started to see some of that number go down and then up. And then as testing increases, it's going down.
I don't believe
positivity rate, not daily cases. I think in some cases daily cases are going down, but that's why I tell people as well to keep in mind is that maybe the positivity rate was so high because of the way that the testing was being done. Only the people getting tested were the ones that were likely positive to begin with, right? Man, so that's something else to keep in mind. Is that testing wasn't really consistent from February all the way to even September. There wasn't a consistent amount of tests being done against all the entire population. It was a rising number of tests, which would then draw down that positivity rate, which is exactly what I said at the very beginning is that as more people will be able to get tested, that positivity rate will end up going down. And what we've seen is exactly that. As testing has gone up, the positivity rate has gone down. The daily cases in some cases have gone up, but as in terms of positivity rate, which to me is more important because daily rate only looks at the positive cases. The positivity rate looks at the positive cases to the total test done, not just the positive cases.
My whole problem with this whole ordeal.
So
now we're starting to see.
I think you're muted there, Sheep.
Oh. My whole problem. Sorry about that, guys. My whole problem with this whole ordeal is now we're starting to see that this was all blown completely out of proportion. So through this whole thing with all these lockdowns, all these small businesses gone out of business. I mean, the media mishandling of this and local governments mishandling of this has destroyed millions of lives, millions of fucking lives. And on top of that, all these Black Lives Matter and all these Antifa protests. So you got these small businesses that have been locked up, no money coming in. And then these riots pop in where they're busing people into these fucking cities, Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and burning these cities to the ground. So while these people were already hurting because of COVID-19 and the lockdowns and their businesses being closed, now their businesses are going up in fucking flames.
So this is a great topic switch here that I'll actually engage. This is a good conversation.
I was trying to switch topics.
Yeah, I know. COVID kind of gets boring after a while. I mean, again, just in sum up before we move on to the protest, to sum up everything, I think that people need to stop being so judgmental, knowing what we know now. And if you want to make a educated assessment on COVID, look at that. Look at the actual case at the point in time in which you're making this judgment. So if you're looking at, say, a incident that Trump said in March, look at all information that led up to March, and then make your assessment and say, was that a good call or not, and seeing and judging it then that way.
Let's start.
You cannot take the future.
Let's start with Minneapolis, right? Let's start.
Sure. Let's start with Minneapolis.
All right, so the whole George Floyd thing, man. They used that as a straight up weapon. Like, they had people bust in, pallets of fucking bricks fucking staged. Like, that was planned. That fucking the way the rioting went down, that was all fucking planned. And what's shitty is after all the information come out, I'm not saying those cops were fucked up. I agree that them cops were fucked up. But now it's come out that he died of a fucking overdose. After they burnt down a whole fucking city, now they're saying he died of a fentanyl overdose.
So this is the whole thing. All right, we're going to talk about George Floyd. I know we're running through like 100 different topics, but this is great because this is something I've been wanting to talk about for fucking 6 months now.
Let it all
I don't know why I don't know why I did that. But anyways, yeah, man. So here's the thing. Remember what I said when we first started this conversation? I look at the facts, and that's what I work off of. George Floyd is a great example of this. A lot of conservatives jumped on this and said, yeah, the police were wrong. The police killed George Floyd.
They were wrong.
Well, that's true. You can kind of say they were wrong because I think that's something
what was it, 7 minutes and some change that dude's knee was on his jugular? Yeah, that's no bueno.
So we can get to that in a second. My point is that a lot of conservatives are trying to use this, and this is what us conservatives tend to do a lot of the times, is that conservatives will tend to try to find that one incident that they can say, hey, look, we're on your side, right? It's that kind of, hey, I'm not racist because I have a blank friend, right? Whatever kind of race that may be. This is that kind of same incident. I'm on your side because of I agree with you on this. Here's my opinion. I said this from the beginning. I want more facts. And I know people who hated this because they're like, well, why do you want this? Because I don't think it's clear cut as to how he died. And I think how he died played a very, very important factor. And a lot of people took offense. It's like, DogHouse, look at him. He's on the ground, knees on his neck. Isn't it obvious?
Well,
and it's not.
What I said to everybody that was coming at me like that from the beginning is that any incident that involves the police and a Black American death or getting beat up or whatever, anytime the media starts to exploit something, I immediately become skeptical. Immediately. Sure. Because mainstream media and journalists don't do the work anymore. They're all about clicks and outrage culture. I mean, people being pissed off is how mainstream media gets paid now. They don't report the fucking facts. They report on things too soon. Like, I know you want to continue on the George Floyd thing, but like let's talk about the Breonna Taylor case. That's a mess.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
I was just educated on this yesterday by Marlon Brown.
Yes.
I had no idea. They were trying to make this lady out as a saint, and she was like a head of a fucking trap house, bro. And they didn't do a no-knock raid. They knocked on the fucking door.
Yep.
And I'm like,
some people don't know this. And here's the funny thing about this. I'm glad you mentioned this. There are photos from the briefing room that the police were in at the time, and it validates what the cops said. On there, you can see where it says the address, and right above it, it says knocking first or something like that. The other address, which was the address that was mentioned, actually says no knock warrant. So here's what people say. Now, people say, and they are right, that there was a no-knock warrant signed for Breonna Taylor. But if you look at the police interviews that happened, so I watched both interviews here, okay? First off, I listened to the police interview where they interviewed the police officer, and then I also listened to the defendant who shot at the police officer, okay? Two conflicting stories here, first and foremost.
Right? He was released.
One of the things is that the officer said numerous times that they knocked on the door and announced their presence. They said they did it multiple times. They said when the officer finally made entry, this is the officer's account. When the officer made entry, he came to the bedroom, not the hallway, the bedroom. And when he came to the bedroom, he saw Mr. Glover, I think was his name. I could be wrong. Standing with the gun drawn and Breonna Taylor next to him. And so when Glover shot that first bullet, he then unloaded a clip. Okay. And unfortunately, that clip hit Breonna Taylor, and that's how she ended up dying. Now, here's what is important. The investigator asked the officer, what was he wearing? Was it a tactical vest and everything else? And he said that based on the lighting that was given from the bedroom, that you would be able to see there was a tactical vest. There's some conflicting stories here, though, because the defendant, the one who shot at the police officer, said that he stepped out into the hallway and that the police just knocked down his door and started firing. It seems very sketch to me that would happen. Now, here's the problem is I don't think it's been clear whether or not there was body cam footage. I think there's been reports that there wasn't. I think there's some reports that there were. As more gets surfaced, I'm sure we may find out this stuff. But as you said, when you dig into this, you find that they were justified in going to her house because they were possibly, now we can't verify 100%, but from what we've been able to see from jailhouse calls and a bunch of other different things, there was money being funneled through Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was essentially like the accountant, I guess you could say, of this trap house.
This is what the mainstream media reported. The mainstream...
It's not to say that, and then this is what people... this is how this typically goes. When you prove that these people weren't a saint, they go, well, it doesn't justify them dying. It's like, no, you're right. It doesn't justify them dying, but it proves that the narrative that was being formed was faulty. So I don't think that when you really dive into this case and you take all the facts and you look at it, that Breonna Taylor was innocent. But furthermore, what really drove this story...
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I was told yesterday, and guys, you could fact check me. I'm no expert on this fucking case. Yeah. None of us are saying that Breonna Taylor deserved to die.
She was caught up in the crossfire. To be fair, she was caught up in the crossfire. That's true.
See, the media reported that they had a warrant for her boyfriend, and then I found out yesterday the warrant was for her.
For her. If you go to the actual warrant, you will see where she is listed on the warrant for her residence. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the reason was because the ex, who they also had a warrant for at another residence or whatever, was still receiving mail at Breonna Taylor's home. And so that was one of the reasons why. And that was, again, they said that they didn't believe that there was any kind of like immediate threat or anything like that. So that's why they proceeded with a actual knock warrant and not a no knock warrant. They actually wanted to go in there and actually, just knock and give them a chance. Hey, come to the door and whatever.
Until yesterday, this was my belief of things after I was waiting on all the facts on the Breonna Taylor thing before I commented about it. And up until yesterday, this is what I thought went down. I thought that it was a no-knock warrant and that the guy that they were looking for, she wasn't with anymore, and she was with a new guy, and that he shot through the door. He shot through the bedroom door, and the police returned fire, killing Breonna Taylor. And my take on things, because that's what I had heard, that's what media was fucking reporting. My take on things is everybody was trying to crucify the police, when in all reality, the problem necessarily isn't what the cops did. It's the no-knock warrant. The judge that signed the no-knock warrant. No-knock warrants should only be used in cases where somebody on the other side of that door is in immediate danger of death or bodily harm. I think that's the only time a no-knock warrant should be signed.
Well, and the problem is there's been a lot of falsities with this Breonna Taylor case that has really made this difficult, right? There's the narrative being formed. What a lot of people were forming this narrative to be found is this, right? This is what the media would like you to believe, and this is what in a lot of cases people do believe, and it's not what lines up with the facts, is they believe that the police knocked down Breonna Taylor's door, stormed into the house. Donald Glover shot one bullet at the ground. I don't know if some people actually will mention this, some won't, and some people just ignore this fact and say the police just started firing away. And Breonna Taylor somehow, by the way, which is really funny to me, was in the bedroom laying down and ended up just getting innocently shot by police. But here's the problem with this narrative. If we were to look even away, let's ignore all the other facts here, okay? Could someone explain to me, like, the odds of police just bursting in and unloading clips and it actually hitting Breonna Taylor enough like it did, very slim. I don't know how the layout of the house is, and I think that'd be really great to see, just to understand the full picture. But again, if we're taking the narrative that's being formed, that's the narrative that's being formed. Was they just busted down the door, didn't say anything, just boom, knocked down the door and started firing away. But that doesn't line up. So this is why I wish people would just be more patient. Get the facts out. The interviews are out there. Matter of fact,
I'm okay with people fucking jumping to conclusions. What I have a problem with is mainstream media putting their spin on fucking things, and literally cities were burnt to the fucking ground because of how it was reported on.
Yeah, let me do this too. I got a bunch of links for everybody, and if anybody wants to check out these things I have. There is a search warrant right there for Breonna Taylor. Some additional facts with photo evidence. So this one here too is another great one that actually I think this one shows the actual rumors. Some of the rumors are squashed them. You can actually see in this one a link I just posted. This one actually has on the board, you can look and it says knock and announce. So there's some links there. You can check those out, and it's right there on that picture there. But anyways, those are some great links. Check them out. As a matter of fact, I'm actually going to post the audio link to the interviews as well, so that everybody has everything.
I'm not going to fully change the subject. We're going to stay on the Breonna Taylor.
No, that's okay.
What led us to this is talking about Black Lives Matter and Antifa and these riots and stuff. And so I want to offer a solution. Like the way that these protesters and these rioters are reacting to these cases is insane. They're not solving any issues. And what the real issue would be here, if it were the case, which it's not, it's just what the mainstream media is, we really need to go after no-knock warrants. No-knock warrants, that's something that you need to protest against, to stop those from happening unless somebody's in danger of immediate bodily harm or death. That's
yeah. So here's the thing about no-knock warrants. I understand why they're put in place. I don't know the efficacy of it. I don't know if they're very great or not. I get it and I understand it. In other words, if you knock and say, "Hey, your neighborhood police are here," and you're going to a drug house or a trap house, the chances are they're going to flush the drugs.
I'm a CQB guy. We call that dynamic entry. It's when you stack up in a door and you bust through a door and you fill the room, guns out, cocks out kind of thing. Yeah. The only time, and I actually teach a class on CQB and dynamic entry. And the only time you would want to use dynamic entry is, as you were saying, is to catch people off guard. Or you have to get through there really fast because somebody's in danger of bodily harm or death. Like, those are the only cases where you would ever use dynamic entry. It's not safe for the people inside the house, and it's not safe for the police either. I mean, how many times have you seen the police video where they're trying to knock a door open and it doesn't open?
Oh, sure. And again, as far as the ban on no-knock warrants, I don't know, and I'm not sure.
I'm not saying ban them. Yeah. Dynamic entry is a very useful tool. I'm saying that they should only be issued, no-knock warrants should only be issued in very rare certain circumstances.
That's fair. No, that's fair. And again, that's something that the judge needs to be, maybe more evidence needs to be given or something like that. Well, I definitely think if it were the case
that that's how it actually went down, which it didn't. Instead of trying to crucify the police, they should have went after that judge. Like they should have protested against the judge, and they should have protested against the no-knock warrants. Which is why everybody was upset, is because that's what it was. That's how it was reported on, that it was a no-knock.
Sure.
Right? But everybody just wanted to riot and protest and stuff. But I didn't see a single sign talking about no-knock warrants. I didn't see a single sign calling out the judge that signed the fucking warrant.
Yeah, well, here's the thing about the protest. Let's talk about the protest a bit. People need to understand how the criminal justice system works, okay? Because this is super, 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 super important. I believe personally that if people understood how the criminal justice system works, we may have less riots. I don't expect everybody to have a law degree. So maybe I'm far out here I'm asking for this. But a lot of people are asking for no justice, no peace. This is a common chant. What justice do you want? I always ask people this. What justice do you want? Right? Are you asking for the cop to be charged and found guilty? Well, then let's dive into this, because I think this is super important. If you end up trying to go into the criminal justice system and riot and protest, I understand that these two are different, but let's say rioting, for example, and that's what you believe in your mind is going to cause justice. It's going to cause the opposite. If you are in the community and you are actually protesting and you're actually doing all these other activities, understand that your particular chance and your particular damage can actually cause a trial to get moved. You may no longer have the opportunity, because it gets moved to a different county, to sit on the jury. This is super important. If you want justice, you should be clamoring to get on that jury. But if you protest in the streets and you cause damage, you are working against your own definition of no justice, no peace.
Like, this is something I've been screaming on the top of the mountaintops, man. If Black Lives mattered to Black Lives Matter, then why are they burning down black businesses? Why are they burning down businesses that employ black people? Now, when you take out 2 grocery stores in your neighborhood, all the well, not just black people, white people, Latino, Americans in general that use public transportation to go around and shop for their kids, to get groceries, guess what? Those buses aren't going to take you to the neighboring town. Nor could that neighboring town supply enough groceries for the city next door to them. They got enough groceries. They literally are stocked for 2 days. Most grocery stores are stocked for a couple of fucking days. They don't have freezers in the back. They don't have a way to store food. So if you take out the grocery store in your community, your neighboring community can't support your community.
Well, and here's the thing. In terms of protests versus riots, I'm 100% for protests.
Me too.
In a peaceful manner. I am against rioting. And I'm willing and fully willing to sit here and separate the two. A lot of people will try to die on the hill that riots are protests and then they're too interchangeably linked. I'm not going to make that description. But I will say that those riots are what's going to be heard the loudest over those protesters. And this is what happened earlier on in Minneapolis, which people, again, we're in a very fast-moving news cycle. People tend to forget this, that there were protesters in Minneapolis after the whole rioting and looting of Target and stuff, that stood out in front of businesses and said, no, this isn't what we're supposed to do. We don't see that much often now because it's like a wildfire, right? It's spread so quickly and kind of got out of hand. But the problem is that these rioting things did take the mainstream narrative away from the protest. And now that's what we're seeing now is this rioting taking the forefront as if this is everything. And it's not. And I'm willing to accept that. But a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are going to look at the riots and say that is what they stand for. And so it goes against if that's what I would advocate anybody who's protesting. If you're the one that's out there and you're genuinely protesting with picket signs and everything else that is your God-given right in America, at least, you should be fully against these riots.
Hey,
stand
man,
in front.
I agree. And most Americans, most Black Americans, most Americans in general, aren't represented by Black Lives Matter. I don't know a single black person that is about that movement. Now, I'm not saying I have 100 black friends, but the black friends I do have hate Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. The thing about Black Lives Matter is this. It doesn't seem to me like there's much about reform. There has been a movement for Black Lives, which is a subcategory of Black Lives Matter that is radical. I mean,
their movement has been hijacked by Marxists, man.
It's very possible. And what I'm looking at specifically with it's called if you look at the M4BL Act, M4BL movement. They came out with, I believe it's called the Breathe Act or something like that. I don't think it was a Breathe Act. It might have been something else. It was a full list of demands. It was like abolishing ICE, abolishing prisons, abolishing this, abolishing minimum mandatory sentencing laws, abolishing maximum mandatory sentencing laws. It's like, here's the problem with that, though. Okay, if we want to get into that topic. Okay, so now you got like no bar in between. So a judge sits there and goes, okay, you've been charged with weed. I don't like weed. You're going to go to jail for 20 years. It works against your narrative. But people were supporting this. And I believe, and I don't want to get it wrong, but I'm 99% sure it was Rashida Tlaib that supported this. And I want to say it was Ayanna Pressley, but I don't remember. 2 senators or House members supported this movement's bill. And M4BL is pretty radical in my opinion. But they have a set of demands, and I have to give them props for that. At least they have a set of demands. Black Lives Matter is kind of very broad and not very specific in terms of what demands they want. Defund the police has taken the forefront, but the problem is how do you check the governments that are defunding the police? And what's your purpose behind that? If you're reallocating funds from police to these community enforcement places, well, I can give you examples from Portland where they're asking workers to not police officers, by the way, just anybody who works in the police department. That means accountants too, by the way. This could be anybody that works under the police department. They're asking non-represented employees, union represented employees, to take off 2 weeks to save money that they'll then allocate to community resources. This is defund the police. 2-week furlough, not getting paid during a pandemic. This was Portland's way of defunding the police. And they advertised it. They're like, oh, we saved $17 million on our new budget, but nobody's going to go check the budget. They're also not going to see where Portland also got a body cam footage or body cams. They're getting rid of the program because they say that it doesn't help the perception of the public. They say that body cams don't really increase the public perception with the public, so we don't need them. So they're saving money that way. So when you say defund the police, you might want to check the community that you're in for when they say defund the police and go to the budget. Look at what they mean. Go to a city council meeting. Ask them, what programs are you getting rid of? And sometimes they'll tell you the good things, right? They'll tell you the things that they want you to hear that think are fluffy. I want to hear the stuff you're not telling me, because this is exactly what Amazon, Target, all these other companies did when they increased the minimum wage, right? They touted, we increased the minimum wage, but in the backside, what you didn't see is they decreased the hours to make up for that increase in the wage. So they're snaking around these things. So
I think that if they really wanted reform and change with American police and sheriff's deputies, they wouldn't want to defund or take money away. I mean, if you're a soldier and you go do a tour and you fight in war, right? You go do your 3 months, your 6 months, however long you're over there. You come back, you get time to decompress, time to spend with your families. And if you look at soldiers, they're training 20% of the time. They never stop training. They don't go to the police academy, get out of the police academy, and just stomp on the streets the whole fucking time. I think the police should be treated very, very similar. I think that the police should work maybe 2 months and get a month off. I don't know what the number is. Maybe it's 3 months, 1 month. Maybe it's a month and then 2 weeks off. I think that their average work week should be 20% training. I think that every police officer should be like at least a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. I think that they need more resources. Hey, look, so this is my opinion. I've been talking about this almost every podcast that I've done the past couple of weeks. Being a police officer in America is an impossible job. And only about 10% of our population is really capable of doing that kind of job. And if you think about it, what it really takes to be a police officer, you kind of would have to be a heartless, crazy person. You got to be able to go from zipping up a 2-year-old in a body bag to dealing with some kid you pulled over for speeding going, am I detained? Am I detained? With the fucking camera in their fucking face. What people always fucking forget is this. They see a man in uniform or a woman in uniform and they immediately, this is their first perception. This is authority. This is a cop. This is an oppressor. In all reality, they're just a human. They're just a person. They have bad days. They have good. And police officers, most police officers, every day is a bad day for them, and almost all of them have PTSD. Like, just imagine you having to zip up a 2-year-old in a body bag, or just imagine some of the evil. I mean, they deal with the worst of people out there, and they don't ever get breaks. You know, they get their little 2 weeks fucking vacation. They might get 1 or 2 days off, you know, get the weekends off or something like that. But they're literally all running around with PTSD, and they have no resources to work that shit out. I think a good way to deal with PTSD amongst, first of all, we need better vetting, because not every person should be a cop. There are bad cops out there.
I want to hit on this.
Right, I'm gonna let you in. Second of all, a lot of these cops are unhealthy. They're not in shape. Part of your you know, your psyche, your mental strength is being healthy, exercising, having an outlet for all the negative energy or negative shit you deal with. If police officers trained 20% of their work week, imagine what that would do for their mental health. You know, you're a health guy. Exercising keeps your mental straight. Keeps your mental strength high. There's no resources for cops. They got an impossible fucking job. They don't get enough time off. And right now, most police departments, if you have to go see the counselor, the police department psychologist, they're all in fear of losing their fucking jobs. When that's another thing that needs to be dealt with. They should monthly, every police officer in this country monthly should have to go see a psychiatrist and talk to him. And if for some reason the psychiatrist feels like they need some time off, they should get paid time off. And they should never be in fear of losing their fucking job, because they're just human beings. They're just human beings. They need a time, they need just as... Your average American, like, I'm a welder. I go to work 10, 12 hours a day, bust my ass, come home burnt up, sweaty. And what do I want to do? I want to come home, have a cold beer, and decompress, right? Well, police officers need that shit too. They need time off. And so, like, if a police officer's out on duty and has to use his firearm, or maybe a kid gets killed, or maybe he walks up on an accident that's completely horrific, I think a cop should be able to take some time off to process that shit without fear of losing their jobs.
And I think that, I don't know, I can't say this stands for everything, but I think there are some policies in place where this does happen, where they're able to decompress. I don't know how it works. I don't know if you represent,
but I don't think that it's at the level that it should be. You know, well, I think they need more time. Like I was saying, maybe work for 2 months and take 2 weeks off. Maybe work for a month and take 2 weeks off. They need constant decompression time. And then I'm talking about, they still get their weekends off. They still get their weekends. They still get their vacation. But, you know, let them do a tour. Let them work the streets for 3 months and then have a month off or something like that.
Well, and here's the thing. So I say right now, in terms of training, that cops right now, based on the number that I've seen, and I'll throw the statistic out there every week, I don't care, there are 53 million police interactions that happen every year. Only 1,000, now I'll get into this number in just a little bit to break it down. 1,000, I think it's about 1,000 to 1,100 people are killed in police custody every year. That is according to, I think, the Washington Post and another one that keeps track of it. The reason why they keep track of it is because in 2013, there was a bill passed where all states had to report by a certain year the number of police deaths in custody. The number of deaths in custody. I don't know why it's been held up. I don't know what's going on. It passed. It was supposed to be enacted. I don't know what's going on. But anyways, that's the number we have, 1,100. Now, we don't know how many of those are justified, unjustified, but let's just take 1,100 and divide that by the 53 million police interactions. You're at a nearly zero, a statistical zero, in my opinion. You're at 99.99% of police interactions end peacefully. No deadly interactions whatsoever. And so what I say to that is that our training is really good. I think most police in the United States, 99.99% of police officers in the United States do their jobs right. And I think that I think that's something that I wish people would understand. Is I think the training that they have is adequate. When people sit there and say, well, they need de-escalation training, Are you implying they don't have de-escalation training? And if you're saying they do have de-escalation training, what in that particular program is bad? Matter of fact, you can go, I can give you an example with Texas. Texas has a state licensing requirement to be a police officer. You can go into there and you can look at the syllabus. Basically, you can't look. I don't know if you can look. If anyone can find it, great. Link it to me. I'd love to see it. But you're going to get a syllabus of what they teach you in de-escalation training for Texas. Each state has its own things. So you have to look individually in your own state. But people should look into these things. Look at what police officers are going through. You can publicly access what's called TCLOSE, TCLEOSE licensing, where you can see what classes are being taught by police officers. Other things people don't keep in mind is that, let's add on to that. Let's say, because a lot of people who go into policing usually get a criminal justice degree. Okay, let's add that. Let's add that into the total time between the academy, and then let's add on top of that the time they spend in on-the-job training. I think they have plenty of training, and a lot of it's practical training as well. They actually run through different scenarios. I myself,
don't think,
not to give too much information here, went through a testing to be a police officer. Call me biased or whatever you want to call me. I never made it through. So whatever you want to call it. I was required just in the sheer testing to literally go through a mock building. Okay. I had to run upstairs, run across the hall, go downstairs and go out the building. Had to jump a fence. Now this is all physical stuff. Okay. Granted. And then I had to pull a body that was like 100 freaking pounds, I don't know. It was like 100 yards. It's insane. And so I think that police are given a lot of training, and in some cases,
I don't think that, look, man, for instance, my podcast, I took an 8-month break, right? I came back and I'm having to relearn how to use all this software and stuff. 20% of their work week needs to be training. They need to allocate, maybe let's just say 10%. I don't care what it is, but at least let's say one day out of their work week should be training. They should get paid. It's good for their health. It's good for their mental health, and they'll always be improving their skills. Like you, bro, whatever your trade may be, you're always trying to improve yourself, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, as a
everything.
Musician, I'm a musician. Just because I'm in a band and we have a 1-hour set worth of music doesn't mean I'm going to stop practicing those songs and trying to improve my techniques. And I think that police officers should... Man, I like the idea of 20% training. I like the idea of 20% training.
And I'm not trying to say you're wrong. I always ask people when they mention time, right? Because I think a lot of people would mention, a lot of people will mention that I mentioned, for example, to show what's in place currently. De-escalation training is about 8 hours long, according to the syllabus for the TCLOSE certification for Texas. But from what I was able to understand and look at, is every 4 years they have to get recertified in de-escalation training, and I think some, 2 or 3 other ones if they don't meet. If they don't take a class prior to that, I think. So if you go to I guess there's different classes that are offered around the state or whatever that you can actually go to if you're a law enforcement officer, take these classes. And if you take these classes, you don't have to go for the 4-year training thing. But it's an extensive list of things you have to take. But it's the time thing to me when I challenge people on this is I'm like, what's the purpose of extra time, right? I think that I get the concept, right? Is that it'll be more second nature, but I don't necessarily know if we would need more time or less time. I really don't know, because I don't think that it is a matter of time. I think it's a matter of going through the situation. I mean, let's be real here. Okay. And this isn't to say all training is bad, but how many times have we been through training and stuff, and then we get on the actual field? I'll give you a classic example.
Yeah, training doesn't always translate to real life, but what it absolutely can do, it's good for your mental health, it's good for your physical health, and it does better you. It does prepare you better. I mean, all right, for instance, when I talked about I think police officers should be a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. Now, you can roll on the mat once a month, but if you're rolling on the fucking mat every day, it just becomes like... it becomes like the subconscious thing you do. It becomes like muscle memory. Yeah.
Well, so this is
you
where I
talk
think
about
that,
de-escalation's being able to me take a guy that's twice my size and put him exactly where I want him every time without having to think about it.
yeah. And here's something to think about as well is I've tried looking in to see what an average police officer is, right? I try to see how many were served in the military prior to joining the police department. How many people have served in a prior police department? Because this is some of my experiences that I've seen, is that when I was testing to be a police officer, there was other police officers that were in that particular county that were coming from a different police department as a constable, but they wanted to work for the city instead. You also have people that worked, let's say, as at a county level that were either, again, same situation, either former department or they came from the jail or they came from the prison. They usually have some kind of criminal justice background. And so I'm very curious about that as well, because I think that also lends to their training, right? Like if you were in a previous law enforcement department, will obviously have some kind of training there to go into the next department. I think that if you were military, I think you have extensive training, in my opinion, to then move into a law enforcement kind of role. And so I think that, you know, when it comes to policing, I think that we have right now is working based on the 99.99% of police interactions ending peacefully. I think the 1,000.
I can agree on average what we're doing is working, but again, I would say that there could be a lot of improvement. I don't think that we should ever settle when it comes to anything in this country. I think we should always be shooting for the stars. And also, you know, the American people, there's a lot of people out there hurting. The mainstream media has got people hurting. Right? So what do the people need to see? The people need to see some sort of effort. The shit has already hit the fan, right? I'm offering my ideas. I'm offering some solutions that the people can see. So one of the chatters brought up a good point. The cops shouldn't have to work 2-3 jobs to pay their fucking bills because they're going to work stressed out. They're going to work tired. My brother was 25 year, not my blood brother, just a friend of mine. 25 years canine unit, and the dude would literally work a 12-hour shift and then go do a security job until 7 a.m.
Jesus,
you know what I'm saying? So. Don't defund the police. Throw more money at them. Yeah. I think that if you're a police officer, I mean, here where I live, I think it's $50K starting off.
It's about $50 to $60K starting off.
That's shit money. A police officer starting off should make $75,000.
And it depends. It also depends on if you have a degree. I think if you have a degree, it goes up like $3,000 or $4,000, but I don't think it's very much.
$75K is what they need to start off doing. It's the hardest fucking job in the country. There's not a
the problem with that is usually what I've seen, at least having not worked in law enforcement, but having worked in another law enforcement capacity. I don't want to give away too much information, but a lot of times police departments and other law enforcement entities usually get the short end of the stick when it comes to funds. They don't really get much of the revenue. They're usually barely scraping by. Some cities will put a lot of their budget towards policing, but some don't. And you know, I wish more police officers did get paid better. But again, I think that they would have to. It's a juggling game. I think that if they were to keep everything else the same within that budget, but just increase the police department salaries, they would end up, in some cases, having to increase property taxes. They'd have to end up increasing things like that.
I agree. And that's why I think we should end the war on drugs. How much does the war on drugs cost?
Well, that's a federal one, isn't it? Not city or local.
Well, no, I mean, it is city and local. It is the war on drugs costs police departments a ton of money. You end the war on drugs, you free up cash. You take that freed up cash, you pay your officers more, you get them more training, and you just get them more resources in general. End the war on drugs. Decriminalize. I'm not saying make everything legal, but at least decriminalize. If you decriminalize, you can free up a lot of fucking money. If you end the prison for profit system and you end the war on drugs, you can throw more money at police officers. The war on drugs costs a lot. As a matter of fact, man, policing in general revolves, almost 100% revolves around the war on drugs. Imagine what they could be out on the streets doing if they weren't tied up chasing a kid with a joint in his pocket.
So let's talk about this real quick, because it depends on the city's budget. I'd have to look. I think I looked at like 3 major cities. Civil asset forfeitures are usually extremely low, because I think that's one of the things that go into drugs as well, right? Is that when you get pulled over for drugs, you usually get your vehicle taken, or you usually get other property seized. However, there are processes in place to get those assets back. But the problem with civil asset forfeitures and fines and things like that, they're usually at the low end of the budget in terms of revenues. The largest revenues usually come from property taxes, licenses, things like that. Those are usually the higher end of the revenues. Civil asset forfeiture is usually really, really on the low end of the pole. Could it be lower? Sure. I mean, I don't disagree, but I'm just saying they aren't a large part of the budget, I guess you could say, or revenues. Now, in terms of freeing up money, I guess it depends on how you kind of frame that. At the end of the day, the cops are going to work an 8-hour shift regardless, or 12-hour shift, depending on the department, 8 or 12. And whether 30 minutes of that 8-hour shift is spent on drugs. Now, I guess you could make an argument that depending on the size of the drug bust, maybe paperwork and things like that may take you into overtime, which then you could make the argument that you're saving money with that overtime cost. But I don't know the details on all of that, right? Because if you're looking at, like, if you're still, even if let's play this game, right? Like, if we're looking at saving money, it's if you work an 8-hour shift and within that 8-hour shift you make a drug bust, right? And you make fill out all your paperwork, you're done, you do what you do, dudes are arrested, all that other stuff, and you're home and you're done by your shift in that 8 hours, you're not really saving money, right? I mean, at the same time, you're only working within that 8-hour frame you have. The only time you'd really save money if it was time that wasn't allocated, like money that wasn't allocated.
That's my point. You have, let's say, for instance, Houston Police Department. How much of their overall resources tied up on the war on drugs?
I don't know. I don't know in terms of how much they put.
You got to think about that. A lot of their work revolves around busting drug dealers and drug users. Imagine if that's not a thing anymore. Imagine if their time could be spent somewhere else. I get you make a good point that they're going to work their 12-hour shift no matter what. Yeah. But there's a lot of fucking money spent on the war on drugs, man. It generates revenue too, but I don't think necessarily raising taxes is the fix to throwing more money at the police departments. There's plenty of money out there. There's plenty of money out there on the local, state, and federal level that's being wasted on bullshit. Absolute fucking bullshit. Yeah.
Well, and again, it's when it gets to money, I encourage people to look into things like accounting. A lot of accounting will help you go into and look at these budgets, understand what revenues and expenses are. I mean, a lot of times people conflate revenue with, profit, and that's not exactly how that works. I think people need to look at revenues, look at expenses, look at in some cases go to cities' budgets. This is how I found Portland, by the way. And some cities will be very transparent in how they're spending their money. Some aren't going to be transparent, and what they'll do is they'll literally give you what's called a balance sheet, and you'll see where salaries for fiscal year 2019 were $2 million, and in fiscal year 2020 they're like $1 million. So they've cut salaries by $1 million, but you have no idea where the salaries have gone because they don't go in depth in the budget. But in terms of cost and things like that, it really just depends. We'd have to look at real life examples. But to sum it all up, I think that people just really sum up our entire conversation really is, if I could leave anybody with any information, it's look into these things. If someone tells you that makes a claim like civil asset forfeiture is the largest revenue source for police departments, well, look that up. It takes 5 minutes. We are in the prime time to actually take time to research. If you have enough time to watch football, if you have enough time to sit down on the couch and watch Fox News or MSNBC or CNN, if you have enough time to sit down and read a book, you can't tell me you're operating 23 to 24 hours a day. Sit down and take 5 minutes to research it. Look it up. Be an educated consumer. I'll do a selfless plug real quick. I have what's called a resource library in my Discord. Y'all would have to go over to my channel to get to it. I don't know where the link is and everything else, but go to my Twitch channel, click on the resource library, go to the Discord where you'll find my resource library. I have a ton of information that I have regurgitated to y'all today, where you can find all that information. In the resource library, you will see where I talk about policing and I go into statistics about policing. You can go to my elections category and you'll see all the different stats I've got about elections. And sometimes there's stories, but that's because they're relevant to the thing and they give enough information to where you don't have to find the source. But yeah, I mean, but I want people to kind of just look into things. That's really why I want to leave off on is just do your research and understand what you're talking about.
Okay. So I was waiting for some info to come in. Now this is just Texas. I'm sure there's states that spend much more because I don't think that in Texas, I don't know if we have the biggest incarceration number in America. I'm not sure. But $22,000 a year is what it costs to house a prisoner. $22K a year. And so that goes back to what I'm saying, like ending the war on drugs. If you're prisoners, or to me, if you're using a substance, right? To me, a crime is only being committed when you damage property, you injure somebody, you hurt somebody, you assault somebody. I mean, you have to. To me, somebody has to be negatively affected in my eyes for it to be a crime that's been committed. So what I'm saying is like, yes, murderers, rapists, bad people. Let's lock them up. But let's stop locking up people for a joint. Let's stop locking people up because they ate some fucking mushrooms. How many people are in prison for victimless crimes of just being in possession of a narcotic? If we get those people out, most of the people in prison are for that kind of shit. And if we get those people out of prison, we're freeing up a lot of money that can be reallocated to the police departments. That's taxpayer money. Now, I realize these prisons generate revenue as well, but $22,000 a year is spent with taxpayer money. That's just taxpayer money. There's probably a lot more money spent on them than that. That's just how much taxpayer money is being allocated to an inmate. $22K a year.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot, and I think that at the thing about prisons is that that's state versus local. In terms of prison, we can get into all those different statistics about that. Again, I would have to break down the actual cost and what they actually look at in terms of the cost, and have to evaluate, was it already budgeted for? Again, if we're looking at, like, for example, a lawyer, right? Would we say that the lawyer is already doing the 8 hours, and so with the 22,000, would that just have been spent somewhere else that isn't on there? It's a gray area. I'd have to look more into it. I'll admit that it could be the case that you would save money, but I'd have to look more into that to actually make that kind of assessment. I haven't looked at it from a financial aspect in that terms.
All right, man. Well, if you wanna end it on that note, I know you got to get back to the family. If you want to wrap it up, you want to shout yourself out, your channel, your Discord, your Twitter, any of that. Go ahead, man.
Sure. So you can go check out my Twitter. I believe it's the DogHouse Talk Show. You can also check out my Twitch channel that's non-existent at the moment, but you can check that out. It's twitch.tv/TheDogHouse Show. I believe that's what it is. Let me double check. It is twitch.tv/TheDogHouse Show. Go there. You'll see a Discord link. I encourage anybody and everybody, click on that Discord link, come into my Discord, and go into and use it for the resource library. If you don't chat in there, that's fine. But I think there's a lot of useful information there that a lot of people can use and should use, including Trump's favorable policies, which you might find interesting because some people don't know anything outside of the typical talking points of Trump's favorable policies. So you might find some good things with that.
What about the YouTube channel? You got an active YouTube channel?
I don't really have much of an active YouTube channel. I've kind of put that. I think that's also called the DogHouse Talk Show. If you want to go check out the YouTube channel, but there's really not too much there. But yeah, if you want to check it out, it's like the DogHouse Talk Show.
All right, man. Well, it's been fun catching up with you, dude. Go give the baby show the baby some love for me. Tell the wife I said hey.
We'll do.
And
we'll do.
Man, you have a good one, brother. Take care, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate it. You have a great night.
All right, brother.